everyone, and welcome to another exciting live spoiler cast. I'm your host, Captain Logan, and tonight we're going to talk about Blade Runner 2049. It's been a couple weeks since this movie came out. We're coming up into the third week, but some of us wanted to make sure and have a chance to see it again, so that's why we're doing it kind of late. And I'm so glad that we are, because joining us on the panel tonight, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panel. For the first time in a very long time, it's Jackson Rasco!
How you doing?
He's back, everybody. The ex-chat moderator used to be part of the Seven. Rasco's not been with us in a long time. We really miss him. And Rasco was supposed to join us for an Alien Covenant spoiler cast, and we didn't end up getting around to that. I'm hoping to do a commentary sometime in the near future on that, Rasco. So I'll be hitting you up for that. But that ended up not coming together. And Blade Runner is, along with Alien, one of Rasco's big like loves. And Rasco, how in the world did these two things happen the same year? Isn't that crazy?
I don't know. This year was made for me.
I feel that way too. I got the tick. Anyway, once again, in case you've never joined us before, hi, I'm Captain Logan. I run this crazy thing. Here's Eric Holden.
Interlinked.
And joining us again for the second time on the channel in almost as many weeks, it's Alexi.
Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks
Alexi,
for having me back.
Alexi, yeah, absolutely. Alexi was with us for the Star Trek Discovery spoiler cast. This will be a different kind of fun, I am sure. And Alexi was, everybody really loved him, was really glad that he was there. And I've been wanting to have him on the channel for a long time, and happily managed to do it again. In fact, Alexi is a lot of why we're doing this tonight, because I had not intended on doing a spoiler cast for Blade Runner, and he was like, you guys are doing a spoiler cast, right? If you're not, I'll do one. And I almost had him and Alden go ahead and do one without me last week, just because they really wanted to do one, and I didn't think we'd have a chance to see it again, and finally we all just broke down and decided to wait a week. So unfortunately Alden couldn't make it. I think he's out of town or something, but we got the four of us, and we're going to chat about it. So anyway, if you're watching with us live, thanks very much for being here. Got a few viewers right now. We're starting a little bit later than normal, so I expect that's part of it. And also, this movie, you know, didn't do huge guns. There weren't a ton of people who went and saw this. This is not a for everybody kind of movie, so I wasn't expecting a huge turnout tonight. But we did get a lot of requests relatively to do this as a spoiler cast, which is also part of the reason I wanted to go ahead and do it. So anyway, if you're with us tonight, thanks so much for being here, and feel free anytime during the chat to leave your questions for us about things you want us to talk about from the movie, and comments that you have about it. Anytime you hear something that we're talking about that you're interested in adding something to, or fighting us on, or whatever, leave your comments, and I'll be moderating the chat tonight, because I don't want Rasco to have to do it, because Rasco hasn't been with us in a long time, and I don't want to make him work tonight. He's just here to have a good time. So anyway, if I am a little preoccupied, that is because I'll be looking at your comments on the chat, and we will let you direct our conversation somewhat, as much as we can do that, although we do have a tendency to take one topic and roll for 20 or 30 minutes and let that derail into many other topics, but we will do our best to actually latch on to things that you say this evening. Before we do all of that, we're going to go round robin as we always do, and get everybody's immediate first impressions of the film, or impressions as you have them right now. I've now seen the movie 3 times, so I'm pretty familiar with it at the moment. Let's go ahead and start with Rasco, because he's finally back, and I'm excited to hear from him. And just look at Rasco's amazing new look. Just look at him. Rasco looks amazing this evening.
I'm a Blade Runner.
I'll beat up Stephen King.
So Rasco, sequel to Blade Runner 35 years later, how'd you feel about it first time out, and how do you feel about it now?
So I've had pretty consistent feelings about this movie ever since I first saw it, and it's really like overwhelming. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm glad that I live in a world where it now exists, and I don't want to go back, which was the big fear. Like, when you hear that there's going to be a sequel to a movie like Blade Runner, it's one of those movies, and like I think that this is still a true statement, regardless of how well this movie regardless of how well it turned out. I think that the statement that Blade Runner is probably one of the worst movies to make a sequel to, that's still true.
Oh, absolutely.
But it doesn't mean that you can't do it, and I think that that's why this movie is just so impressive. And okay, so I don't know. My favorite thing about this movie is just the direction. I think that my boy DV, that's what I'm going to call him, DV, just so there's no weird mispronunciations throughout this. He's DV. DV, he's a great director. I think that what's so cool is that this movie is in no way watered down from like any of his other films. Like it fits in with his portfolio of movies perfectly, and it doesn't feel like he went outside or had to like strip any of himself away to step into this movie. And I just love that. My least favorite thing about this movie, gosh, I don't know exactly. My least favorite thing about this movie is maybe just one scene that I'm kind of uncertain about for really like weird reasons that I can't quite articulate, because there's a whole lot that we don't know that happens off screen. And it's the scene where they go and when Ryan Gosling is talking to Gaff from the first movie, which is the guy who does the little origami things. That scene,
Edward James Olmos. I mean, you can't go wrong with Edward James Olmos, man.
Yeah, he his character in that scene, it just, I don't know what he knows, and depending on how you interpret things from the first movie, he maybe is acting like he doesn't know things, or maybe is just withholding information. It's kind of, I don't know. So that scene could have been cut, but I'm not saying it should have been. I just don't know.
Well,
yeah.
After we go round robin, we should do the replicant thing.
Yeah. Let's wait to talk about that and make that our first topic.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. Okay, Rasco, that was great. Thanks a lot. We're gonna set you back to baseline now. Okay, buddy. Within cells, interlinked. Alexi, how do you feel about this movie right now, buddy?
all right. Well, I mean, I saw this movie the first time when I was actually, my wife actually sent me to see this movie because she knew I was waiting for it, and she actually endured this movie with me. This is not a movie for my wife. This is not a movie she understands, and I think that's actually the great dichotomy of Blade Runner. It is a science fiction classic. It is, you know, when I heard that they were going to redo Blade or do another Blade Runner, I'm like, it can't be done. Blade Runner was lightning in a bottle that cannot be actually matched. And Denis Villeneuve did an amazing job actually capturing not only the original spirit of the movie, but actually expanding in that world. And I think it's a pleasure to watch what he has added to it. I mean, to the point where with Gaff and so on, I would have said that, you know, this is a movie just like Blade Runner, that there was so much going on in the world, in the universe, that this is a movie that does not take its audience for granted. It takes its audience for a ride and does not explain it. It wants you to think about it. It wants you to experience it with the story. Everything going from Kay's identity, you know, all the way through. I would say that this is a movie that you experience as it unfolds. And just like Blade Runner, the first time I saw Blade Runner, I was blown away by it. I kind of regret that I've seen it now, because I would love to go back and see it again that first time, because it is a seminal and almost visceral experience. I think the one thing that I hate about what is happening is the fact that we're looking at Hollywood overreach. There are, I can bring up 50, 60, 70 different industry papers right now that are like, oh my God, Blade Runner 2049 is a flop, and actually that is complete opposite if you look at its numbers. Even with a 62% drop off from week 1 to week 2. You're not looking at a failure of a movie. You're not looking at a flop of a movie. You're looking at a movie that was made with the expectation that Hollywood always gets, which is that this is going to be the next great thing, when what we're looking at is a film that is really an art piece. And it is a complementary art piece to the original art, which is a treat and was not necessary. It was not necessarily a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, what's amazing, Alexi, I like that you brought that up at the end, is that the same, attitude about selling the movie didn't win its way into the film at all, into making it at all. Then that's astounding, which is what I was worried would happen with it. I kind of thought this would be Tron Legacy all over again. And I mean, I don't hate Tron Legacy, but it is not the same kind of movie Tron was, and this is precisely the same kind of movie Blade Runner was, except it tickled certain of my sensibilities a little bit more, actually, because it was a bit more of a character piece. So that was what I was impressed with. I also want to say something else about something Alexi just said, which is, Alexi, would you agree with me, and this is going to sound somewhat pretentious of me to say, but you said this is such a thinking person's movie. Don't you think this is the kind of science fiction film that separates the readers from the non-readers? Like I kind of feel like the majority of people that really appreciate and get this movie are probably people who read books. Is that a horrible thing to say? I kind of felt that way about it.
Well,
especially because of its pacing, right? It's slow paced, but it's paced the way it needs to be, and I think a lot of people aren't going to appreciate that. I saw people get up at the last screening I saw today. Yeah, with full bags of popcorn. Yeah, about an hour in, I watched an entire family that was behind me. They just didn't get it. They got up and left. And then when I walked outside,
and then their kids.
Yeah.
Who brings the
kids? They weren't young kids. They were like teenagers. But when I went outside, it was like an older couple with teenagers. Maybe 13, 14. But when I take a 13-year-old, was thoughtful to this movie. But when I walked outside, some people might disagree with that with nudity and stuff, but you're really thoughtful 13, 14.
I saw Blade Runner when I was around that age.
Yeah, I saw Blade Runner in the theaters and I was 11.
But you'll love this. When I walked outside, I heard somebody like a younger guy with an older guy. It might have been his dad. I'm not sure. Standing in line, turn to his dad and say, "Well, we can't go see Blade Runner because it'll be totally over your head. You'll have no idea. we can't go see that. There's no."
I mean, that's the thing is that we're looking at a Hollywood. We're looking at a Hollywood marketing strategy that expected Blade Runner to pull in the numbers of Star Wars. And
we're also looking at a marketing strategy that assumes Blade Runner is in the cultural zeitgeist the way that Star Wars is.
And it's not.
None of those trailers explained what this movie is.
But
like,
if
honestly, you don't know what it is, it doesn't tell you anything about the movie that they're selling.
No, and people clearly went in expecting a fast-paced thrill ride.
Yes.
That's not what this movie is.
And,
Sorry,
and honestly, the marketing concept that went through was actually perfect for this movie. If this movie was made on a lesser budget, actually the marketing for this movie was perfect, but just not for this budget. And I would say, to your point, cyberpunk, and I hate using that term. I hate the term cyberpunk, because really, if we could go back and ask Gardner Devois to rename the genre created by William Gibson, I would ask him not to do cyberpunk, because I think it immediately dates the genre when it should be called probably something like noir futurism. Now, because punk immediately brings up 80s and wild haircuts and Michael Jackson jackets and so on, and people clanking beer bottles together and screaming warriors.
Well, I think on the literary level, that people don't even think about the word punk, because we say steampunk all the time, and we don't think about that.
It doesn't really have anything to do with the 80s. And also to your point, I think this film actually kind of fits into that genre, even calling it cyberpunk to some degree, just because it's still extrapolating from that time period, not our own at all. It's completely a history, a future of alternate history, and not our future at all.
And beautifully done. And honestly, what I'm looking at is a rebirth of that genre right now. If you're looking, I find it ironic that Sony Films actually helped put out a cyberpunk movie, considering its issues with essentially us living in a cyberpunk world ourselves right now. But we're also seeing a rebirth of the genre. Cyberpunk was frankly literally and probably culturally dead from the late 90s to the the mid-aughts, and I would say that at least in America, it never died in Japan, but really, but even literally, it was never. You had Ghost in the Shell, you had Standalone Complex, you had stuff like that, but really, that was an isolated thing, and literally no one did it. And honestly, 2 years ago, I thought that
we might have lost you there, Alexi. Oh, there he is.
What?
You cut out for a second. Yeah, go ahead.
I said literally 2 years ago, I saw this gentleman, his name is Daniel Wells, put out this book called Blue Screen. And he actually just released the sequel, which is Ones and Zeros, which is complete cyberpunk. And it's cyberpunk with gamer culture. You're seeing that. You're seeing Ready Player One, Mr. Robot, Westworld.
Altered Carbon's coming out on Netflix next year.
Altered Carbon is coming out. Snow Crash. It looks like Snow Crash is going to be coming out. I mean, you're seeing cyberpunk begin to reemerge, and we're beginning to see, and it's a huge treat to see, a rebirth of the genre. Now, if I get my Max Headroom continuation, I'd be set. Wow, that was.
Maybe I'll finally actually watch that.
I'll put it this way: the British Pilot, I absolutely adored and watched that religiously. Now, I would say that, I mean, everything having to do with the Hollywood overreach, that's just, unfortunately, if there are two groups that I can guarantee will eventually overreach and oversaturate their market, it is real estate and Hollywood. They consistently do it. They did it in the 90s. They did it again in, '04, '05, and now they're doing it again. And it's always a consistent thing of rebuild, overreach, destruction. Rebuild, overreach, destruction. And I think it's unfortunate that 2049 is actually getting its, is essentially getting unjust blame and discreditation for being a flop when in fact it's everything but.
Yeah, it's
just a flop on its budget.
Yeah. The problem really is just that we threw too much money at it, and
exactly.
and Hollywood tends to do this with really anything that is genre and people have heard of. So again, it's weird that we've got this, that we're banking on brand recognition because it's this beloved classic film, but it wasn't forced into the box of following any kind of a formula. I don't get how. Maybe it's Warner Brothers before it's Sony. I don't really know how exactly the distribution versus who made the movie worked in this particular case, but it's amazing that Sony's name is on this movie, and it's the movie it is. I can't get my mind around that. It's not a Sony movie.
To be honest, between having various partnerships in films, that is a conversation that I could go in for probably an hour alone by itself.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to attempt to explain that. It is.
But suffice it to say, there are reasons that this doesn't look like a Sony film.
Yeah, it's.
Okay.
I mean, that's esoteric, but yes, there's a reason this doesn't look like a Sony film.
I should mention for folks who don't know, just to Alexi establish your credibility a little bit. Alexi is a literary publicist and is very much has his hands all in that world and knows lots of industry people, producers and actors and directors and writers. And so there's a lot of kind of backdoor insight stuff that Alexi has that nobody else I know could possibly bring us. So anyway, I just want to mention that for anybody who's like, where is Alexi getting all this information from?
It's I mean, it's amazing to see. Now, I mean, I'm curious to see how the damage that 2049 does to the genre. I'm gonna be curious to see if they pull back on advertising for Ready Player One.
Yeah, sure.
I'm gonna see if they're gonna pull back on Altered Carbon, on some of the other things.
I think Spielberg probably helps Ready Player One,
and the fact that it's nothing but throwing references in your face, like
which
they're not
we're really into right now.
They're not gonna. I don't think they'll.
And it's so modern and kitschy and throwback, and that's what we do now. Again, it's weird that Blade Runner wasn't really advertised on them.
No, it was not advertised.
Well, Blade Runner, I think the problem that Blade Runner has coming into this movie is I think Blade Runner, in the past 30 years, has become like almost like the
2001.
Well, I was gonna say it's become almost like a I can think of it, like the Citizen Kane of science fiction, where I think
Yes.
a lot of people know the name and they're like, yeah, it's supposed to be one of the greatest movies, the greatest science fiction movies ever made.
Nobody's seen it.
Nobody's seen it. They've
Yeah.
all heard of it.
Yeah, I could probably
That is
count on
fair.
one hand the number of people I know that have actually sat down and watched Citizen Kane.
I
And,
still haven't seen Citizen
and
Kane.
it, like, it deserves all its
Really?
accolades, but nobody I know has seen that
I've never
movie.
seen
Yeah.
Citizen Kane.
Really?
Well, I have.
I want to
certainly,
play
but-
really, but I've never seen Citizen Kane.
But like, you know, Citizen Kane, I mean, is another literary movie. I mean, if you look at it, that's written and bookended literally as if it was a visual novel.
Real quick,
Um,
guys, I gotta respond to something Connor just said. By the way, hi Connor. Connor's in the comments, and I also wanted to say hi to Dan's News. He's with us tonight. We haven't seen him in forever, so hi Dan, good to see you, buddy. Dan does some of our logos and things, and he's been with us forever. It's really good to see you, Dan. Anyway, Connor, he's kind of fighting with Eric a little bit, and he's like, Eric, why don't we wait to see the movie before we say that Ready Player One is just a bunch of references? He's read the book. He's
I read the
talking
book
about
and I
the
hate
book.
the book.
Yeah.
He says that's what it is. Yeah. So
The
anyway,
book
that's
is-
just so you know. That's why he said that. He's not saying anything about the film.
Not
yet.
being the book, it won't have the chance to explain every single reference after it makes it, so maybe it'll be better.
Wow. Ouch.
Eric
That was
really hates that
painful.
book.
I really hate that book.
Do you?
I
Do
do.
you?
I do.
My assistant actually, my assistant at one point said, you know, she's like, the nihilism of that book bothers me. And I was like, well, I mean, it's cyberpunk. Cyberpunk by nature is kind of got a nihilism to it. Now, I would say it's more of a noir atmosphere because I think that's back to your point. Selling this movie, you have to sell it on atmosphere. And that's what they
Yeah.
did. They did it correctly. It's just not for the budget that they produced this movie.
That's true. I mean, like, what I saw in the trailers is indeed what is in the film. But the difference between something like that and, I don't know, the most recent movie I saw after that, Happy Death Day, I saw it. I saw the trailer for that and knew precisely what I was getting myself into. If it was what it sold. Did not have that with this. Wasn't really sure what it was going to be exactly. But anyway, I want to go ahead and move on to Eric now. And Eric, we did how we felt about it, so you can go kind of quick if you would.
Yeah.
But after another viewing, which we both had, like I said, I've seen it 3 times now. What did how did you feel about it with a little bit more time and distance and seeing it again?
I still think it's great. It's my favorite movie of the year. I more solidified on even things I thought were weaker in the film. I liked better. I think it's a wonderful film. There's a lot of discussion and debate I'm seeing all over of whether it's better than the original.
Yeah.
And I think
It's a testament to the movie, isn't it? That people are debating that?
I think it definitely stands in the ballpark. My final judgment for right now in this moment is, yeah, but it didn't change the world, and Blade Runner changed the world.
But not right away.
That's
Not right
fair.
away. And
Pretty
here's
sure.
the thing. Here's the thing. This movie is not likely to change the world because it is more of that first
It's true.
movie, and
It's true.
it's very similar to Avengers in that you can't recapture that again. You can only put the team together one time.
That's
You know
true.
what I mean? And it's like that with Blade Runner. You can't. In fact, the reason it works is because it's not trying to change the world, although it is bringing new stuff to the table.
Actually, I'm going to go outside my wheelhouse and say this is, you had Godfather. This is Godfather Part 2. And if you look at them, they're almost the same movie in terms of tone, in terms of atmosphere, in terms of director. I mean, the fact that this was not actually directed by the original director of Blade Runner is frankly amazing to me because tonally, you capture the same atmosphere, you capture the same look. I mean, heavy chiaroscuro, all of it, and it's amazing.
Connor makes a great point. This is jumping all over the place, but I want to go ahead and mention this right now. He says, and I'll get to some other folks here in the comments in a minute. He says that this movie is a sequel, or he likes that this movie is a sequel to all cuts of Blade Runner. I think I agree with that.
I agree.
That kind of works.
Yeah, because before this came out, I kept hearing people pushing like, you have
You
to
have
watch
to just watch the final
cut.
cut.
This is a sequel to the. It's not. You can watch any kind
No.
of Blade Runner.
It is not. I mean, this is any interpretation of Blade Runner, including them going off into the sunset and having the
happy
spliced
ending.
the spliced on happy ending where they use
But they go
borrowed
to The
footage
Shining.
from, I believe, The Shining. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, isn't it amazing that that movie was too cerebral for Hollywood to the point where they had to doctor it up and try to make it accessible to all audiences, and give it a happy ending and make it a hopeful film, which it isn't exactly. I mean, it's got optimism, but it's not a. But at the end of the day, you know, it's somewhat bleak. It's got some things to say about where it might be going that could be bad. But the point I'm trying to make is, isn't it amazing that this movie did not do that at all? And you would think you'd be more likely to do that now. I don't mean to keep making the same point, but that's fascinating.
It's amazing how little studio interference there seems to be on this.
There was very little studio interference.
Cannot get my mind around that.
Now, I would say this, that I think that both movies, I think that people look at Cyberpunk as having a bleak tone to it. And actually, I look at it as quite the opposite. I would say that the joy of Cyberpunk and the most human part of Cyberpunk is that no matter what the cost, and there's always a cost in Cyberpunk, going against the system has a cost, and you're not going to just be guaranteed a happy ending. In fact, there's usually that happy ending is paved the way with bodies. You do have it, and even if you stand against the system for just a little bit, no matter what the cost, it shows the humanity, no matter how dark the universe gets and no matter how inhuman the world of Blade Runner or Cyberpunk is, humanity still stands tall, no matter what the cost.
I think the best thing about this particular movie in that genre, Alexi, is that it peels the curtain back some, and yet at the end of the day doesn't tear the whole system down. Which absolutely. I kind of thought it might. Once we got to the underground, I kind of thought it might go there, and really appreciated that it didn't. Once again, jumping all over the place, but we got to start getting into some comments here pretty soon. To something else you guys were talking about a minute ago, I want to ask Rasco a question, which is, do you think, because you and Alexi were talking about how it's amazing that we got the movie we did that is so authentic to what the original looked and felt like and what it was about, without it being directed by the same director. Would you agree with me, Rasco, if I were to say that you probably wouldn't have got that if he directed it? I don't think that would have happened.
Yeah, this would have been a very different movie if Ridley Scott had made it.
I think you needed that fresh set of eyes on it.
Yeah,
I think it would still be a gorgeous, beautiful film. But I also think Ridley Scott would come in and go, okay, here's everything I did wrong the first time, and now I'm going to do it different.
Yes.
Yeah, he would have been there to fix himself, and it probably would have been too much about the mythology. Which is amazing, because I loved, again, peeling back the curtain on how much mythology we got with this movie, but it probably would have been just trying to tell everybody why Deckard should be a replica. I think that would have been the movie.
Well, and we should mention that you and I watched... you and I watched the short films before we went and saw it the second time, which actually does add quite a bit.
I really suggest everybody, whether you've seen that movie or not, and if you haven't, I don't know why you're watching this, but whether you've seen the movie or not, that adds a lot to it. And really, and I won't go through a spiel because again, we did how we felt about it, and I'll get plenty out. But I will say my least favorite thing about the movie right now is just the stuff that's in those short films that I wish was in the movie, and they're not amazing or anything. But I didn't have anything like a sense of what the Blackout exactly was until I watched that short film. And honestly, that little anime movie they made about the Blackout isn't very good, and I could have just gotten a paragraph about that explaining it, and I would have been fine. But I didn't really have that in the film, and I was a little bit lost about what exactly the Blackout was, and it would have been nice to have that. But I will also say that this is a movie that I think is necessary to watch at least 2 or 3 times to really appreciate and fully grasp.
The first Blade Runner,
and the first Blade Runner is that way.
This is Blade Runner. Yeah, this is Blade Runner all over again.
I felt
you're going to find. To interrupt you guys, but you're going to find this is a movie that you can watch 5,000 times, and you're going to, I think, pick out little details.
That's why I felt the need to go again today. I kept, like you said, I kept picking out stuff, each time I saw it, and I feel like it's kind of like Winter Soldier, where I had this with Winter Soldier, I had it with Fight Club. A lot of my favorite movies now weren't the first time I saw them because it takes too long to wrap my head around. Like I need to live with it for a while. And this took three viewings before I felt comfortable doing a spoiler cast. Imagine how much I would feel like I needed to work with this before I wrote a rewind. It's that kind of movie. You always say you don't feel qualified to talk about Blade Runner. I don't feel especially qualified yet to talk about this movie, but I'm going to.
Well, I think that the joy of Blade Runner is that no one's qualified to. I mean, there is actually an ongoing debate amongst the cast and crew as to the Deckard question. You know, this movie can be interpreted,
which we can go ahead and get into now,
so many different ways. And I would say that the joy of, I mean, I have an author who's often with me, who actually had said to me about 5-6 years ago, he's like, I want the rights to do a Blade Runner book on Batty, on just Roy Batty. And I was like, that would be fascinating. It's never going to happen. There's no way I'm going to get the rights for you. But actually, one of the things we talked about was the chess game. The chess game between Edelin Tyrell and Roy is actually called the Immortal Game. It's a famous chess match. Having those layers of detail in there, and actually, I've watched this movie now 3 times as well, and I'll say this: there is that layer of detail throughout the entire film, and I think that's spectacular, because it doesn't actually. I was afraid we were going to get an explanation, a mythology film, and rather than do a mythology film, we have an expanded film.
Yeah,
we have a film that expands the universe and has us look at this universe now 40 years, 40 years after the fact. I think that's amazing.
And like Rasco said, it feels like you oh boy, I can't remember what I was going to say, because then another thought entered my head, and I can't remember what that first thing was. Anyway, sorry about that. I was reading comments, and I do not remember what it was that I was talking about.
What do you want to do real fast?
Let's get into the Deckard thing. So the first time I saw this, I didn't think there was a question anymore. I didn't think it was even ambiguous about it. And after 3 viewings, it's totally ambiguous about it. Ambiguous. And one of the big things for me this time around is the bit where Deckard says they're hunting us, and obviously you can interpret that as just him and his wife and his family, but it kind of reads like it could be that. And then the scene with him and Wallace, especially where Wallace is just like, you're fascinating and I don't understand you, and I have some of his dialogue down. I'll pull that up. But you from the beginning. We're like, yeah, no, it's totally ambiguous. I still don't know if he's a replicant or not. My big thing remains, why on earth would he be? I guess the thing that this adds that makes it possible but convoluted potentially is that depending on how you interpret Wallace's discussion about fate. Is he talking about God as the creator of the universe, or is he talking about just the Blade Runner world, the world of the replicants? Was he made by Tyrell to specifically fall in love with this woman, or is he talking about God and fate? Because if it's the first thing, that's the only reason he would be a replicant. But then why would he be in that system and stuff? I don't know. Why would he be a cop in the first place? That seems really convoluted to me. But before this movie, it really made no sense to me that he was a replicant, because I don't know why there would be a secret one. There are no secret replicants in that.
And he doesn't have any enhanced strength or speed.
Or at least there are no secret cop replicants.
He gets beat all over that movie constantly.
I'll point out that 3 things. First of all, if he is a replicant, the fact that why would he be a cop? It is a possibility that he has implanted memories just like Rachel. That's my one counter argument to that.
Well, no,
second thing is
that's not my question. My question is why him? Like, why would you do it?
Why would you design someone just to procreate with Rachel, but also make them
a Blade Runner that goes and hunts the other ones? I don't know what the point of that is.
I don't know. That is a good question, and
That was
I
my
have
question.
no
Just
idea.
watching the first film is because when you watch the final cut, he's adding back in all this imagery with the unicorn and stuff, trying to make you think that maybe he's a replicant. And my question at the end of the day, and the reason I'm not sure about that cut is I'm like, okay, but what does that add to the film? What's interesting about that?
I think
Like,
thematically,
I would say this is that I think the answer is with the dog, actually, when he's in Las Vegas and he's like,
yeah,
nice dog, is it real?
right.
And he goes, I don't know, why don't you ask him? And that's actually, I think, directed directly at the audience and directly at the debate.
No, it is, but again,
There's
that's
a
not
point where
an answer. That's just acknowledging
No,
the fact
it's
that
not.
there is a debate. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I would say that the fact is that this is a debate that you could continue ad infinitum. I would say this, that it might not even be that Tyrell planned for her to fall in love with him. I think it was one of those things where Tyrell had a replicant, had evidently designed it this way. By the way, I love the God versus devil analogy that's in there between Edelyn Tyrell, a uncaring God, and the devil in Wallace, which is caring a little way too much. And I find that dichotomy just fascinating between them.
Well,
it's a question
you call
of
him the
what
devil because obviously in his, and I can see that, Reed. Obviously in his mind, he just is God, and he cares more about humanity than anyone, and has angels. And then and there's a lot of dialogue that speaks to this idea.
well, Tyrell calls
And
him
then-
in the first place.
Oh, I forgot about that. But also
Yes, he
Wallace
does.
continues to. But then there's a lot of dialogue speaking to the notion that we've all already lost our humanity anyway, and that the replicants are more human than we are, and that.
Well, yeah, that was the Tyrell more human than
More human than human.
Yeah. I just forgot that came from Tyrell in the
but
first place.
I love that this
Because
film,
I don't know that movie that well, and I now know this movie way better than I know that one. So I'm gonna stop talking.
I love that this film is ambiguous about the replicant thing, because the second they made a sequel, I was like, well, they're just going to go with him being a replicant.
With a replicant.
Because
And
I'm
actually-
staunchly anti-replicant, and I was like, well, Ridley Scott's producing it. They're just going to say that's what it is because it's Ridley
But see,
Scott.
that ends up being my big issue with the whole dog thing. Alexi, I love that because it kind of comes out and says ultimately it's not really that important.
It's not important to this movie.
But then
No,
that
it's
makes
not.
the final cut
I mean-
irritating, like watching it with this, right? Like,
Because
I want
human
Rasko to
is-
weigh in. Sorry,
because
go ahead, Alexi.
Because human is not the question. Alive is the question.
Well, yeah.
The Void Conf test is not I've heard people say the Void Conf test is a Turing test. It's not a Turing test, because if you had a Turing test, if you did the Void Conf test, it's the Void Conf test is essentially trying to split hairs between what is one thing and what is another. Instead, what it is doing is that it is not asking the actual question of, is the creature alive or not? Which obviously, when you look at it, it has sentience. It is alive. It is a thinking creature.
No, I get that that's
Now-
the point of each of those movies, but the point I'm making is we then go back and add things with that final cut with the original Blade Runner that makes me preoccupied by whether or not Deckard is a replicant. Like it's not. It ends up not being an interesting question for exactly what you're talking about. Like this actually kind of hurts that for me.
Well, and I think part of the point of the original Blade Runner is that all of the humans are really robotic and distant,
Right.
and the robots are really human. And if he's a robot the whole
Yes.
time, then there is no thematic point being made whatsoever. He is not rediscovering the joy and passion of life from Roy Batty. He's just another robot.
And they're already more human because
Yeah,
they haven't been tainted
I don't
by
think
all
it-
the things we've done to ourselves. Rasko, weigh in, buddy, because we haven't heard from you in several minutes. Go ahead.
Gosh. Okay, so I think that there are a lot of things that people say are changed radically in the original Blade Runner depending on how you interpret Deckard being a replicant or not. And I've always kind of been in this camp that I think a lot of things ultimately in Blade Runner are asking you to accept the premise that a lot of it doesn't matter whether or not he's a replicant, because there's this idea that I think Blade Runner kind of explores really well, and it's this disconnect between things that like we say we believe versus how we actually act. So sometimes people will say like, well, I don't believe in magic, but they might have like weird ritualistic behaviors. Like they might be afraid to step on the crack in the sidewalk. And it's like, so which do you believe? Do you believe that what you're saying you believe? Because logically, I know that I'm not going to step on a crack and break my mother's back. But if you are dodging the crack, then you clearly, or you're not manifesting the behavior that your belief would, you would think that belief would tie to. So in Blade Runner, there's a lot of people saying like these are replicants as if that matters. And then as an audience member, you're watching replicants in certain cases just be murdered. And it's weird because it impacts you. And so I think a lot of those questions, like whether or not Deckard's a replicant, I don't think that they actually matter very much in regards to what you, what's like happening in the universe. They matter more like when you're watching the movie, how you react to what's happening.
Well, yeah, it's the story, it's the thematics of it. Well, I mean, there's also a lot of questions about why would they make a replicant that's weaker than other replicants and program him with other memories.
that's my problem with it is just like you're right. Thematically, there's things to grab onto, but I get preoccupied by the in-universe narrative where I'm just like, but if that were true, it breaks everything, or it gets more convoluted than like these movies are too smart for that, both of them. So it can't be that. So I end up being on the Deckard isn't a replicant side of it because that makes these too convenient and convoluted, and I can't have that.
I'll be blunt about it. The devil himself can't tell because in his conversation with Deckard, he's like, so. What, he's literally Wallace himself is like, I got nothing. Or did you come off an assembly line? You're a fascinating creature, one way or another, and I don't know which way it is. And I think, like I said, I think the dichotomy between Deckard and Wallace, the dichotomy between humanity and the replicants, and the dichotomy between Tyrell and Wallace, I think are just, especially having Wallace as the as a kind of weird antagonist, but also so far removed from the situation that he. I mean, at the end of the day, he walks. I mean, which I think is also fascinating.
Well, I really like that.
I also don't know how he's not going to get chased immediately in 3 seconds. Deckard at the end, the police have that place like monitored. You know what I mean?
Oh, like with his daughter?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's gonna immediately get chased at the end of that movie.
I think that's the point of. Again, I think that's a cyberpunk trope that what you see is a snapshot. There's never a ending. It's always ambiguous. You have essentially a Sopranos ending to every film, in at least as a trope for cyberpunk, because it's never clean. It's never clear cut.
It's not a societal teardown. It's not the ending of Johnny Mnemonic, where it's like, and now we're going to fix the entire world, and everyone's going to know, and everyone's.
Well, and you thought they might have been.
Don't mention Johnny Mnemonic again, please.
I love that movie.
It hurts.
You thought after
that movie hurts.
You thought after we saw it the first time that they might intentionally be setting up a sequel because they want to do one every couple of years after this, and that
is what Ridley Scott said.
And if Alexi's right and they threw a whole lot of money at Harrison Ford, I can't imagine he would come back for another one, or that they would be able to afford him, especially now. But we should mention this. I think most of us probably expected, I guess I'll just speak for myself, I certainly expected that he was going to die in there. It was inevitable he would get killed. We said that before we went and saw it. And was really surprised they left him alive.
I think it makes the film feel more artistic and real, because
the
typical thing you would do is you bring him back and you kill him and you give it to the next generation.
Yeah, especially because it's subverting expectations for a lot of sequel stuff, even as it's using a lot of typical sequel things and then turning them on their heads, right? Like the typical thing to do with a movie like this would be to take the old protagonist, jump ahead 30 years, and give him a son or a daughter. That's what we always do. And it's amazing that we did that, and then we played with your expectations, and it's not the guy you think it is, and his character arc is all about, is he special or not, and does he have a soul, does he matter? And then you get to the end of the movie, and he gets to meet his daughter, and they don't hate each other or fight or anything.
Yes.
So I don't know. I think that's part of why they kept him alive.
Yeah.
But I think also it might have seemed like, depending on what the story they're telling, because obviously it's a different story if you kill him, so I don't know what story that would have been. But I can't help but think if you kill him, it's probably gonna be hard not to make it look like forced drama.
Yes.
Excuse me, because it's not wholly his story. I mean, obviously. He has something of an arc to go through, but he's not even introduced until the beginning of the third act. I mean, or your second act plot point, I guess. He's a supporting character that's kind of a linchpin for the whole thing.
I was going to say, I don't think he is he is a character. He is the MacGuffin at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think even more so, the character arc. Doing anything with him that drastic would take away from the character arc that Kay goes through.
Yeah, of course.
In terms of his development, and I think that's the ongoing question. Is Kay at the beginning of the film is essentially a killer of his own kind, and the question is that what is he? What is his purpose? And then at the end of the movie, his purpose is what he decides it to be.
Yeah.
And by the way, that means he'll die, but at least he dies as his own man, just like Roy Batty. There are some fascinating parallels between Batty and Kay in this that I think are spectacular.
Yeah, and that if he can't be the special one, at least he can, help a guy get back together with his daughter. I like that at the end of the day, that's all he cares about.
I took the ending as Kay dying, but I have heard discussions almost like a Shane thing, where some people are not viewing that as death.
I think that's why they show him bleeding out. I mean...
I think that literally just comes from the fact that in Drive, it almost ends the exact same way with Ryan Gosling's character. Yeah. And so I literally think that's why people are like, did he die? It comes from Drive. I'm dead serious.
I've heard enough people say that he might not be. And I'm like, maybe it is ambiguous. Maybe it's like the ending of Shane.
I'm sorry. He's dead. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Hello, yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry.
No, I just muted myself for a second. Go ahead.
Oh, all right. I was like, oh hell. The entirety of I think of Kay dying, I think that's the entire point, especially with them doing the Liette motif at the end of Roy Batty. I mean, Tears in the Rain. It's thematically, it is the same death.
Yeah, and also, where else, if you made another, regardless of whether or not you have another movie, what would be the point of keeping him alive? I know that sounds soulless and horrible, but like, there's nowhere else to go with that character. I think it's really important that he has a totally opposite love story, if you could even call it that. There's no future for him and the woman he loves because she's not real, and obviously there's an argument to be had about that.
And even if she was, she's dead.
Yeah, sure. And
dead.
By the way, can I just say this because I love this, and I don't know exactly what it means without talking it out a little bit, but I love that love kills joy. I just love that. Love stopped on joy, and she's dead.
Jesus, I didn't even think about that. That's awesome. And also the ambiguity of whether or not Joy is actually a thinking creature herself. I mean, is she alive? Is she dead? Or can she actually be dead? That's a good question. Because I'm not entirely sure
arguing about whether or not it's actually ambiguous as to whether she's got. I mean, because she can say she's thinking in the sense of any artificial intelligence thinking, but as far as is she a self-aware kind of creature? Is she as self-aware as the replicants? Is she? At the end of the day, I would say probably not, but there's sparks of possibility. Here's the thing: the movie seems to be coming out and saying probably not with the billboard. The billboard scene is the big thing, because it drives home two big things. One is those things are programmed to say and be whatever you want them to be. And so so this becomes kind of an Asimov's Three Laws of Robotics kind of problem, right? She has a series of rules that she's governed by, and anything she does, you can fit into that, which makes it really difficult to tell whether or not you can actually call her alive or self-aware. And the other thing is, she names him Joe because that's part of joy. And throwing those two things at you, they seem to be saying she's probably not she probably actually wasn't sentient, or you can fit anything into that box.
And that's a gut punch of a scene. Sorry, my fault.
No, absolutely. It's a great scene. I have a potential read on this movie that I got the second time. It's a little controversial. I'll be as apolitical as I possibly can. But I think it's really interesting that we have Kay and we have Love, who are both, in their own ways, believe that they are special and unique than everyone else. Love keeps saying she's the best. And they both have the shattering disillusionment that they are not, that they are just normal, everyday people as everyone else. And I think it's interesting that Kay has an artificial intelligence, much more artificial than he is, reaffirming how special he is and feeding back to him what he wants to hear. I think there could be some social commentary with that whole thing.
I think there's some.
Which makes me think that Joy is intended to not be sentient. You're what's important, and that's taken away, and he has this moment of realizing, like, oh, I'm just being told exactly what I want to hear.
Yeah, and I think that he feels the need to say that there's a line somewhere, because I think it's really easy. You're right. I mean, there might be a social commentary about the internet in that it's really easy to feel like fake things are real, right?
And it's easy to forget that they're.
And I like that in a world where we've been told the robots are more human than the humans, there's a line that's drawn somewhere.
Mm.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's also the point of... it's that fulcrum for Kay. I think it's that, it's time to be a real boy now. It's that point where he realizes, well, maybe, I might not be special, but that doesn't mean that what I do doesn't count or matter.
Yeah.
And, up until that point, he has been going through the motions. And it's a question of the replicant in the beginning, played by Bautista.
Wonderful.
You wouldn't.
Yeah, shockingly wonderful.
He's also one of the reasons that you should watch the short films, because they give you a little bit of his backstory in the third one, and it's just fun to see him play that character.
And he's just like, I like Bautista. I think he's a good actor, but like seeing him in that short film and this, I'm like, oh, he's a real.
Why
actor.
is he not doing more art house films? I mean, granted, he's going to get typecast where he punches someone or throws them through a wall and everything he's in, no matter what it is. But he needs to do more of those kinds of films.
He has the potential to be the best, like hands down, the best wrestler turned actor ever.
I think so too.
Based on
I think he really is.
Because I think Dwayne Johnson is great.
He's the most successful.
I don't think he would play that kind of role.
Yeah.
Though. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rasco.
I was going to say, if you see him in interviews, he's really humble about it. Like, he doesn't consider himself a very good actor.
Which I think is remarkable, because I think he's amazing.
He's amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's great. I'm just saying he's always like, I'm not a great actor. I just, I get these roles and I do them. It's really funny because he's way better than he gives himself credit for being.
And I find that, I mean, startlingly so. I would say that the character who's like, you wouldn't do what you do if you had seen a miracle like I have. And I think at the end of the day...
he also gets the most important line of the movie. Isn't that great?
Yeah. I mean, Kay, at the end of the day, has to figure out, okay, I'm not special. His final illusion with Joy is shattered. And at the end of the day, it's like, okay. It's kind of like the old parable of the guy who's tossing clams back into the ocean, and the guys and his friend says, "You can't save all of them, so what's the point?" And he picks up one and goes, "Well, the point is that this one matters. It matters to this one, and it matters to this one, and it matters to this one." And I think that's Kay's defining moment is, how does he spend the rest of his life? Just like, again, Roy. How does Roy spend the rest of his life? Fighting for more life.
Yeah, and I wonder if I was going to say this earlier. I wonder if the movie isn't commenting on itself and storytelling a little bit in having a story about like relative specialness, where like we don't have to follow that formula. Our main character doesn't have to be the one, right? He doesn't have to be the most important thing in the universe for the film itself to be special.
Agreed. And again, I think that's a commentary on humanity, especially in a dehumanized environment, in a universe which is literally going to hell. I mean, pretty much.
I don't know. I'd love to live in this. I wouldn't.
I would.
No.
Is it because?
I also wouldn't mind. I love that it takes us 20 years past.
What does this say about Eric?
30 years past the original Blade Runner to finally get to technology that Speed Racer had in the 60s with the drone that comes out of his car.
Oh, no, that's awesome. Okay, I wanted to ask a technology question or two now that we're there. One big question I had, and obviously the easy answer and probably the right answer is so the story can happen. But here's my biggest question after another viewing of this movie. How is it, because I feel like you would have the technology at this point, how is it that the cops are not following his every move 24/7? I just don't buy that they don't have like a drone on him all the time,
I don't mind
or something in his head.
Because that's not how it is in Blade Runner, and so I'm fine with extrapolating from Blade Runner that we do not have surveillance everywhere.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. You think you could build something? You think you could build something into him? The thing that's weird is he is so much of a slave. I don't even know why he's allowed his own apartment.
Well, I think it's the same reason that he's given memories, because they aren't.
So that he's enough of a person.
Yeah,
to do his
he's
job?
enough of a person that he wants to live.
They learned the lesson from RoboCop without having to go through RoboCop.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you're saying.
I think that's exactly what it is.
Okay. All right.
And I would also say that
I buy it this much more now.
Again, I think it also defines their baseline. If you get them a little too riled up, they go way off baseline, and that's a problem.
Don't you think it would be possible to put surveillance on them all the time without them knowing about it? You know what I mean?
But I don't think they have that in this universe.
Yeah.
They don't have it in Blade Runner. And so I'm fine with buying that this universe does not have as much surveillance as our current universe does.
But you think they would at least maybe in his car have something running all the time? You know what I mean?
Actually, they did, because
That's
that's how Love.
what he says, right?
That's how Love finds him. If you noticed.
He's got the tracker in the car.
Yeah, but I thought she put that there.
No. You are confusing it with the other tracker that is put on him by the prostitute.
I'm not confusing it with that. In fact, I was going to ask you if that was a tracker or not. I thought it was,
but
I wasn't positive. No, I know that's a different thing.
Okay,
all right.
Okay,
Sweet.
I think his car just has a tracker because it's a government.
No, because they both find him independently. Yeah. I had to watch the movie 3 times before I even had a sense of what in the world was going on.
That's fine. That makes it just like Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is a movie that you're going to watch and dissect 50, 60, 70 times.
Yeah, it's going to drive me insane.
Yeah, I mean, Blade Runner is, 40 years after the fact, we're still debating as to whether or not Deckard is a replicant or not.
Part of the reason it's difficult to expect like this movie to be accessible to a general audience and to not expect some people to get up and walk out is it really breaks your expectations of how movies are paced, right? Like you have to, and even Blade Runner did that in '82, right?
Yeah, in '82 it was too slow and cerebral for that audience. And you look at the movies that they were putting out then,
as opposed to how close that was to Alien, and even I hate to say this, I talk all the time about how I'm afraid that my standards are too low, and then I see this movie and I'm like, oh yeah, my standards I gotta really start pushing them back up again. I had that problem the first time around. I had to adjust my expectations because I haven't watched a movie like this in a long time. Nobody make fun. Well, make fun of me if you want to. I don't care. I fell asleep the first time.
You were
I
suffering
love
from
this
jet lag.
movie.
Add to that.
No, I was suffering from jet lag, but I mean, like this, and I discovered that because it's not that I wasn't interested, and it's not that it wasn't gripping. But the first time I saw this movie, I nodded off a couple times because it's so dark, and I'm in a really dark room, and I saw it late at night, and it's paced really slow, and it needs to be. But man, if you blink for any part of this movie, you're not going to be sure about the rest of it.
Well, exactly. I mean, this is a detective movie. This is a detective. Actually, it's not.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Dan's News had the same thing. He said he was pretty dozy the first time too. So
it's not a detective movie. This is a detective novel.
Yeah.
In visual form.
Separates the readers. And I need to read more.
But it's also paced like the epics of the 50s and 60s.
Yes.
It's like a Charlton Heston movie or Lawrence of Arabia or something.
With fewer
like
people on
films.
screen at the same time.
Yeah.
Guys,
and this.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no! I was going to say, I was like, this is a noir detective film, and it's the little stuff that counts. And yeah.
Thanks for taking up for me, folks. I appreciate it. A few people in the comments agreeing on it's a great movie, but I too was nodding off a little bit. And Mr. Marine Beanie says that he had the same thing with the first Blade Runner, and he says that's one of his favorite movies.
And
I think I fell asleep the first time I saw The Matrix too.
And going off the detective thing, much like all of Chandler's novels, when you get to the end, the resolution of the mystery is not really what's important. It's the experience you had getting there and the characters you met along the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Every time you say Chandler's novels, I'm always thinking, like, I want to read a Chandler Bing novel.
There's a joke about that in Friends, where they're like, name one person named Chandler, and goes Raymond Chandler, like, you made that up.
I remember that joke. Anyway, we've got to go to the comments. We're already an hour in. This is exactly what I kind of predicted would probably happen, but let's run through some comments real quick. And folks, if you want to leave more that we make sure and try to grab onto, now is a really good time to do that. We're going to knock through these as quickly as possible. I should never say that. Dan's News! Did he just happen to have that memory? Did any other replicants have that same memory?
I think that's possible.
Yeah.
I'd imagine that is not only possible, but probably likely.
And especially given that he knows his memories are fake and he feels weird talking about his memories, I get the impression that most replicants
and that's
don't
why
bring those up.
That's the only way you can see it is not being kind of contrived. The thing is, if he turned out to actually be the child, the one, it would like if you think about it, that would have been way contrived. Like that he was the one who went to that farm and found that box. Like it all unravels if it's what you think it is for the first 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That is correct. And I by the way, I love the visual cues that they put in there that it was not him. For instance, if you notice, all the children slaves had short hair, and the boy slaves were shaved bald, and his memory his memory was of a person with short hair, but not shaved bald. And like I said, there are things in there that you can't you look at and you're like, and again, 2 or 3 viewings of the film, first time I didn't even come close to noticing that, and then I was like, oh, I get it. I think that goes back to the question of whether or not Kay is special. I think that there are many replicants that have that very same wooden horse memory. And
but here's what's weird about it. It makes you wonder if a bunch of other replicants would have done exactly what he did when he found the box, and then how special does that make him?
And I think they would have, because when he meets the cult, they say, we all wish it was us.
And then it makes you ask the question you always ask about humanity. That's how smart this movie is that, but how much of what we do is free will, and how much of it is just our nature? And so the human versus replicant question ends up really just being the free will versus predetermination question.
Agreed.
At the end of the day.
And again, I think that this movie is intelligent enough to actually question,
or at the very least, nature nurture. Yeah. So, Kevin effing Spacey, you guys you keep having more names with profanity in it, so that I can try really hard not to say the profanity part on the channel. 2049 focused on the interesting character this time around. Deckard was too boring in the first film to be the main guy.
No, you're missing the point of why Deckard's awesome. Deckard is like if a janitor went on a quest to find the lost Ark. It's like this guy who is just really not very interested in the world, and all of these like amazingly impactful experiences are just hitting him, and he's just like this normal guy who's not very interesting. He probably wouldn't be very fun to hang out with, and he's just like, and it's all just hitting him in the face and going over.
Yeah, because the movie is really boring if it's from Roy Batty's perspective, and it's this guy who really understands life and has like this real philosophy trying to make someone else who doesn't have that understand.
Which is totally what the Matrix tried to do with Neo, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's exactly the same thing.
Well, I mean, I would say that
I never thought of that until Rasco just gave us that wonderful insight. And Rasco, don't you think that in a way they're kind of trying to do the same thing with Kay and Nez?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I also think I watched your How We Felt About. That's one of the things that I actually like about this, that Harrison Ford does seem like almost like a different old guy than Deckard.
I'm liking that more and more as I'm watching it, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big thing, because regardless of whether or not he is a replicant, he definitely questions it in Blade Runner, because he's asked the question, like, have you ever taken the test? Do you know if you're a replicant? So he's at least questioned that before. Once you do that, if you look at yourself in the mirror and you see Deckard, you'd have to be like, I'm so boring. I have like nothing about me. Like, who am I? And then you would become someone to like compensate for that.
And the Tears in the Rain speech, like, it really is a life-changing moment. He started being different.
Dan's news, get out of my Las Vegas! Carl Maxey, was anyone else worried Harrison Ford might die in this movie like Force Awakens? We talked about that, but did you guys think that too, walking in, that they would probably kill him off?
I thought so. I thought that we were looking at Deckard's last hurrah.
I thought it was likely.
Oh, I'm so glad that wasn't the title of the film.
Deckard's last hurrah.
Blade Runner 2049, Deckard's last hurrah.
Deckard's last. Just so you know, that's the year it happened.
Replicants Strike Back. Like, I think I wasn't expecting anything going into this movie, because I had no idea like what to expect. I was just like, okay, what's gonna happen?
No, you're right. It seemed like such a bad idea, and at this point, and I know like a lot of probably everybody here is not going to agree with this, and I don't have the history with Blade Runner you guys do, but I think at least right now I like this movie a little bit more. Just me personally.
I think it has a superior story.
Well, I'm a story guy, so there you go.
Well, and that's the thing that I think is the sense that I have gotten from people is, if you are a Blade Runner devotee and you have loved Blade Runner for years, if not decades,
not everybody can get away with saying that.
You will not think this is better. You won't be able to bring yourself to. But most of the people that I know that are newer to Blade Runner, have seen it a couple of times and appreciate it, but it's not like one of their things, they are saying that this one's better.
Mm-hmm.
As a guy who looks at story structure and loves story structure, this has the superior story to it. Blade Runner was more groundbreaking.
It changed the world.
Fail. Yeah.
It changed fiction forever.
Yeah.
Right, but for me, I have always had a complete disconnect between importance and, you know, and quality, and also saying best of something is always like totally subjective, and is kind of a like personal preference question in the first place. I think it's almost objective to say this is a this is a better, tighter, more resonant story. Although the first movie might, for whatever reason, resonate with other people in a different way and better than it did with me. But I don't know. So like those are separate things. Blade Runner 2049 is never going to be as important as Blade Runner, but I like it more. I like it more right now.
Blade Runner actually informed an entire genre. It was literally the Star Wars of a genre. Up to the point where it is an William Gibson, who wrote Neuromancer, arguably the first mainstream cyberpunk book, actually gives this anecdote where he saw Blade Runner after turning in the manuscript for Neuromancer and being completely and utterly shattered, leaving the theater thinking that, my God, they're going to think that I ripped off Blade Runner. Which was not the case. It was, divergent creation. But I would say that Blade Runner informed the entire genre of cyberpunk, whereas Blade Runner 2049 has a superior story. I think it does better with its character arcs. With the exception of Roy Batty. Roy Batty is still, I mean...
Roy Batty is one of the greatest antagonists of all time.
Yeah, but I
wouldn't
gotta say this.
I wouldn't say he's an antagonist. I'd say he's a protagonist. But
he's an antagonist in the sense that he's against the main character.
He's not a villain. He's an antagonist.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he's still an antagonist. Yeah. But speaking to that, with Love being sort of in that role, in my first viewing, I didn't get anything from her. I didn't really grab onto her, and thought that scene of the water at the end went on too long. And I don't feel that way at all now.
No.
I think she's fascinating at this point, and I think her performance is really good. I don't know if she was just understated enough that I wasn't with her, or I thought she was playing too much against type or something. But I really like her now, and I think she's a wonderful foil for him because, as you pointed out at the second viewing, obviously they both really want to be that special person. They both kind of want to be the one in their various worlds, but one of them wants to be Gabriel. One of them wants to be the lead angel because she doesn't think that she has any chance at being anything more than that. She's never gonna be God's elite. She's only able to be one of God's chosen army, and of course that's what separates her from the main character. And both of those people want to find the MacGuffin of the film for different reasons. Yeah. And I don't know. She's great. I don't know what I was thinking.
No,
I would say this.
You
didn't love Love, but now you love Love. I also love Joy, but Love killed Joy, and that's really important.
You're never going to get tired of that, are you?
No, it's both interesting and hilarious.
I mean, I would say this. Love in and of herself is... she's an angel to the devil. I would say that she's also the one character who Kay could very much be, and actually I think Kay and her are the same character. I mean, when he walks into the chief's office and says, "It's done," I'm burning everything down. I'm killing everything I can possibly kill, until he realizes what he actually has.
And they're either the only two replicants that lie, or they all do, but we're just told they're not supposed to be able to.
Which I think is also compelling. I think it also goes back into, the growing beyond their programming. I'll put it this way. This has happened before and it'll happen again, which I had to put that in there because it's just funny.
Dance News, I gotta say this real quick. Dance News just wrote Blade Runner 2049, bad Inside Out fanfic, Love kills Joy.
Love kills. Wow.
Sorry, that's pretty funny.
That's awesome. But I mean, I would say this, that 2049 with Love, you have a character who refuses to grow beyond herself. And she's also, I mean, that scene, which is chilling, where she's crying at the birth of the new replicant. You have an entire character there who is showing clear emotions. And I'm not entirely sure what she's reacting to, whether she's reacting to one of her own kind being born into slavery, or the beauty of the birth itself, or what. But there's certainly something there.
Or the possibility of procreation, because of course that's what he's trying to do.
And she cries later. When does she cry later?
I can't remember.
There's another point where she cries.
I think at the death of Rachel.
Yes. Is she crying there? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That did look better on another viewing.
I think it looks amazing. I think it's the best.
I still don't think it looks as good as you do, but it looked better than I thought it did.
I honestly thought it looked really good. Like, for some reason, when I watched that scene, I wasn't even thinking about her being CG. I was just like watching it, and I was just like, "Oh, it's her." And I honestly, like, after the scene was over, I started to think about whether or not she was CG, and I was just like, I feel like they got a look-alike, but I mean, that's obviously not what they did. But
Sean Young looks amazing.
Yeah.
Sean Young. Well, I mean, I would say this, that
wasn't Sean Young.
The entire I think the Uncanny Valley also.
Oh, was it Sean Young? I thought you were just saying someone that sort of looked like that.
No, Sean Young is Rachel.
Yeah, Sean Young is Rachel.
No, I know, but I didn't think they got actual Sean Young back.
I don't know, but she is credited.
They did get her back. Okay.
Yeah, she is credited in the credits.
And then what? They like de-aged her, and then
Maybe I don't know.
or maybe she's only in the credits because you hear her voice.
That's possible, but it's not in the scrolly credits. It's in the names coming up credits.
It might also be that it might also be.
I also forgot that was Sean Young in the first place. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It also might be a likeness thing. There are certain there
It
are
might be a
certain
contractual thing, yeah.
there are certain SAG and SAFTRA things that where if you're going to use the likeness of an actor, you have to actually pay that actor.
Yeah.
But
that's-
again,
Back to the Future
but
too,
again,
right?
to be
Back to the Future
where
2
it-
did that. Yeah.
But again, to be where it was in the credits is unusual.
Yeah,
If that's all it
yeah,
was.
yeah. It's not just
That's
listed
fair.
in the scroll credits. It's
He's saying
put
like
up
the
a
credits
bunch of
that
the names.
they put up in front of you, it's there. It wouldn't be there if it was just that.
That's a possibility. I haven't actually looked into that. I know she wanted to be in Blade Runner 2049 and wanted to have a big character piece and actually was doing Sean Young things. You know, I'm surprised she didn't show up to the set dressed as Rachel.
maybe she did. Maybe that's why it looks so good.
It's possible. Now, I mean, I would say this, that the idea that Wallace is an imperfect creator, essentially because he can't even get the eye color correct. I loved that.
I don't think that's him being an imperfect creator. I think that's him overlooking the details. I think that's him looking at the big picture but not the
makes
small
him
picture.
perfect, right?
That,
Well, but-
that makes him a poor copy of Edelin Tyrell, which means that he is, you know, again, uncaring god or a devil who's frankly just a
Well,
poor
I think it's interesting you keep referring to him as the devil because with Tyrell it really was this kind of like beauty, like he saw the beauty in his work and that kind of a thing. He was really proud of it. When we get to Wallace, he talks a lot and he philosophizes a lot, but his motivation at the end of the day is supply and
It's evil.
demand.
Yeah.
He just wants this so he can make more product for more people. And he makes it sound real fancy and real pretty. He just wants to be able to produce more replicants quicker.
I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, you're right, but I don't think it's just straight up like making money. I think it's also delusions of grandeur. I think he does see himself as God. I really do. I think because you can't forget the line where he says, "We've only been to 9 planets." Like he seems to really, and we've got a commenter. Actually, I'm going to segue this because this is the next thing I was going to bring up. Nathan Snyder didn't like Leto's performance and doesn't like what he's doing with it. And I want to talk about that. And I'm hearing that from a few people in the comments. They're not liking what Leto did with it, and some people think he's too stilted. I think there are places where like I think he's intentionally trying to look. I don't know. Understated is not the right word, but like he's not flamboyant.
I feel like he's doing the Steve Jobs, right? Like
yeah, sure.
He is taking Steve Jobs to the nth degree.
But I feel like there is a difference in the lines where he's just philosophizing and the stuff that he really thinks, and I think he really believes that we are the best thing in the universe. If there is a God, we're the best thing he created, and it is our duty to take over the universe, to spread out and put ourselves on every planet, and it takes a slave labor force in order to do that. And I don't know, I don't think it's just profit motive. Like I think it's delusions of grandeur.
But I also think that if you look at Tyrell's view of his creations and Wallace's view of the creations, they're very fundamentally different. Wallace looks at it as a product
To get him to where he wants to go.
Yeah. Tyrell looks at it as a creation that he has done the best job he can with. Again, an uncaring god might not be any better than a devil or than the devil who cares a little too much.
But that's the thing, he's not an uncaring god. He cares about humanity. He's
talking about Tyrell.
Oh, is he still? Okay.
Yeah. Tyrell's god. Well,
Tyrell's god. Tyrell doesn't feel. I mean, Tyrell looks at Batty and says, I created you the best I could. And you did great with what I gave you. That's awesome. I love you. It's great, but it's very cold. Wallace has all of those the philosophy, the supposition that he is looking at mankind as godlike and so on and so forth. But really, at the end of the day, he's looking at them as just a product.
And he'll also make them feel as good as he wants them and make them feel as important as he wants them until he has no use for them, and then he does not care.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I'm not going to totally disagree with your God Devil read because I think that works. That's not really how I saw it. I think I kind of saw it more as, and I didn't think enough about Tyrell because I haven't seen that movie enough. But like with going back and thinking about that, I think they're both seeing themselves as different kinds of gods in the sense of what the replicants are. Like for Tyrell, it's like the replicants were his people, his chosen people in the first place. For Wallace, they're the angels. Like, he is God in that he's also lording over humanity because of the things he's able to do. He's not creating us, he's creating the replicants, but because of all the power he has, he's the next best thing to God. So so his replicants are his angels, and for him, he's not a non-caring God because, after all, the biblical God doesn't really care about his angels. That's why you got the devil in the first place. I don't know, that was
I also have a question about him, which is his body artificial, or is he experimenting on himself? Because we see no other humans with cybernetics inside.
Yeah, I thought maybe he was just a self-created cyborg.
Because he's got the things there and he's got the eyes, so I'm wondering if maybe his body's entirely artificial, or if he's just doing experiments on himself.
They'll tell us.
Like that.
It's a good question, and it's a question again.
It's probably in the movie, but we have to see it like 60 more times before we figure it out.
It's entirely possible.
You could also maybe see it, I'm fixated on this now, you could also possibly, I would have to think about this for you because I just thought of this, you could also possibly see one is the Old Testament God and one is the New Testament God, but I'm not sure if that works.
No, that's a possibility.
So that's a thing to think about too, maybe?
That's a viability, yeah.
So apparently, and I haven't looked this up to make sure, but Connor says that apparently at one point David Bowie was supposed to be Wallace.
Oh, that would have been wonderful.
That was the thought initially. How do you guys feel about the performance we got there? I was actually really impressed.
I really like it.
I actually I liked it. It was subdued, but I think it was supposed to be subdued. I think that you get a chilling performance.
That was the word I was looking for. Thanks, buddy.
What was that?
I said that was the word I was looking for. Subdued. Thank you very much.
No, I mean, you could have easily played Wallace as, completely acts crazy, and he could have done his Joker impression again. But I would say this, that actually what we got was far more chilling. You have a guy who just is not, he's human, but there's something wrong there. It's with the eyes. There's no fixing what's wrong with those eyes.
Well, it's the Hannibal Lecter take on the crazy person, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to the over-the-top maniacal. It's the very reserved, very in control all the time kind of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think that there were wonderful parallels there between all of the human characters. I mean, even if you didn't get Deckard, even if you don't put Deckard in that category, Wallace as one of the few humans that is on screen that we know is definitely or more or less human. It's an interesting dichotomy between him and I can't remember the police chief's name.
Oh, the Robin Wright character.
Robin Wright's character. That dichotomy as well.
And she's typecast, but she was the only actress for that role.
She's awesome.
She's the only actress for that role.
She's had a great year this year.
Yeah,
frankly.
this has been Robin Wright's year.
I also, whoever her stunt double is, when she hits the counter, that was really awesome.
That was either a really padded counter or somebody went to the hospital and for the sake of a great scene. And our audience the first night was all, oh! I know I did that. When you said visceral, that was immediately the scene I thought, oh!
Well, I mean, with Love killing the coroner, where you're like, oh, that ain't right.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Jesus Christ, man.
The blood rolls into that. Yeah, and that guy always dies in horrendous ways. Have you noticed this, Rasco? That's the guy the crazy guy the Joker hires in Dark Knight, and then they bring him back in Gotham to play essentially the same character in the Joker episode, and it's great. But everything he keeps showing up and stuff, and he dies in horrible ways almost every time. He's like the new Brad Dourif or something.
He's in. I think he might be in like 2 or 3 other of Denis Villeneuve's films.
Oh, interesting.
Or Villeneuve, I don't know. DV.
DV.
I broke my own rule. Oh my god.
Well, I mean, if he's
Dan just wrote, yeah, that guy did not look right.
well, if he's going to be the Dorff of the new wave cinema, I'd love him to be in Dune.
Yeah, he'd be great for Dune, sure. Mr. Green Beanie, at the risk of going back and talking about the is Deckard a replicant question again, brings up something that harkens back to something you and I talked about after we saw it the first time, which is the notion that Deckard might have been a Nexus 7. You suggested that Rachel might be a Nexus 7.
We are almost for sure that Rachel is, because when we see her serial number, it's N7.
N7.
Then that's,
And we skip that. We never discussed the Nexus 7. Like in all of
now, does that make her the only one?
Unless Deckard is also theoretically.
Unless Deckard is another one.
But that would make him the first one, unless she's older than we thought she was.
Well, and it would also be why she's so special, is that is possibly the only one Tyrell ever made that could procreate, which is why there are no other Nexus 7s.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
And it could have been actually even a happy accident.
Yeah.
You know,
I wondered about that, though, because if it is a happy accident, then it means that Wallace is just using his own interpretation, and it's not the film telling us anything when he says that that he perfected.
That Tyrell took with him in secret.
That Tyrell, and that he perfected procreation. Like that means that he's either assuming that he did that on purpose, or it's a happy accident. He perfected, but nobody knows how. It's like everybody in Star Trek trying to recreate Data. It's like nobody can do that.
Yeah. And that is...
You'll just never have another Dr. Soong. You can't do it.
And that in and of itself is another question. Is, you know, did Tyrell know what he did, what he created?
I think it's interesting that Wallace makes everything.
Yeah. Well, so does Tyrell in Blade.
Yeah, Tyrell does too. I mean, the Tyrell Corporation is pretty much ubiquitous and...
But I do like the meet the new boss, same as the old boss thing of, yeah, the Tyrell Corporation completely went bankrupt. It was replaced by almost the exact same corporation.
Yes. But to Alexi's point earlier, when he said that Wallace is like an imperfect creator, I like that he started in farming. I think that's kind of amusing. That like maybe that's part of why he's not as good at the human. But I mean, in some ways he's better, right? Sorry, go ahead, Rasco.
I was gonna say I would love to see what he looks like pre-discovering, like rediscovering and reworking the replicant technology, because I imagine all of his like weird just quirks or like pretensions that he's kind of created in order to like cope with the fact that he has to understand he's creating like hundreds and thousands of replicants that are just going to like suffer and have really like empty lives. And to deal with that, you have to create a bunch of
memories, like kids beating you for a horse.
Exactly.
I also have a question about Wallace. How old is he? Because he looks max like 40, 45, but this takes place in 2049. He takes over, I think, in 25, I think is what we're told.
2025, I believe, was.
Yeah. It's just a couple years after.
Which would be almost 20 years ago. Was he like a wonderkind, or is his
I think
possibly being altered?
No, because I mean, like remember Leto's like 42.
Okay, but that would make him 22, if not younger, when he took over Tyrell's business.
Yeah, but I mean, he could be playing a guy that's supposed to be upwards of 50 even. I mean, like who knows what his age is supposed to be? But
that's why I was asking.
Sure, yeah.
It might have more credence to his body possibly being artificial.
But he could be a wonderkid, sure.
I mean, my question would be: is that have we even actually met the real Wallace? I mean,
yeah. Yeah,
LMDs.
because you're right. If he put himself in another body, then that would explain that.
Well, not even that, but to get a little Westworld here, have we actually met the real Wallace? I mean, it's a possibility that Wallace is no longer even remotely human, and there are just many Wallaces that he's essentially replicated.
I don't know if that's as interesting, but maybe, and also if that's what they did, you'd think that they would kill him just so that they could have a big reveal where they bring him back. Because I was a little surprised that he didn't die. Also, Nathan Snyder in the comments just mentioned Alchemax. I was also thinking that.
Alchemax is very clearly inspired by Terrell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good point, but
because we wouldn't have 2099 without Blade Runner.
It's true, but there's a lot of, and we were just talking about this the other day, that in a lot of ways, Blade Runner was the next Metropolis, because every city in science fiction things was Metropolis up until Blade Runner, and then after Blade Runner, it was all Blade Runner, except for every now and again when they went back to Metropolis.
Intentionally not Blade Runner.
Yeah, and often when they were intentionally not Blade Runner, they would be Metropolis again. Carl Maxey, so Wallace is Brainiac? Yes, in Alexi's version, Wallace is Brainiac.
That, or he's, other creators with pretensions of godhood. God, I can't remember the character's name now, but from Westworld, he literally is the creator of the replicants. If you guys want to look at the story of replicants from the replicant point of view, Westworld, I would highly recommend.
I've been hearing that's really good.
It's amazing. It is spectacularly well done. I highly recommend it. It is brilliant, and honestly, when I saw Westworld, I was like, oh my god, it's Blade Runner from the replicants' point of view. They did Roy Batty. And the creator there has actually a friend who he has doesn't even know he's a replicant. So, I mean, it's a possibility that you have replicants upon replicants upon replicants that, is anything ever human anymore is a good question.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's at the crux of the movie. Guys, we are 25 minutes from 2 hours. Let's go ahead and go around and bring up anything else that we each individually wanted to make sure came up. If there's anything else you guys really want to talk about that we didn't get to, and Rasco, I feel like you haven't jumped in enough, buddy. I feel like we've been stepping all over you, man.
Oh yeah, no, it's hard for me to talk about Blade Runner. Like, I don't really have a whole lot to say. I just really like it.
Well, I'm sure glad you're here, buddy.
No, it's awesome.
What other big aspects of the movie have we not talked about yet?
I want to talk about music.
Yeah, a couple people in the comments complaining about the score, saying that they don't like that it's Zimmer, it's too Dark Knight. I don't really agree with that.
There's one or two places that are very blah.
Yeah, but I feel like
on a second viewing, it didn't feel as Hans Zimmery. It felt more Blade Runner-y.
Does Blade Runner not have some what?
It does.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought it did.
Blade Runner.
That's what Blade Runner sounds like. I mean, yeah, you guys, Zimmer can also be inspired by Blade Runner. Everybody is.
Honestly, the Vergilius's music is iconic, and I think that Zimmer did a decent job copying it. I mean, or expanding upon it. Sorry.
Okay, I disagree. I like it because I think it's very different from the music in the original Blade Runner. For one, there's a lot of like blues and like sax kind of noises if you go back and watch Blade Runner. This is very different. This is a lot of very long, clean noises. Like, it's just like, it'll just go on like that. And I think that's different, but I'm not different in a bad way or like different in an uncreative way or different in like they tried to do it and they just failed. I just think it's different, and I really did like the music in this movie.
It's very industrial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm actually soundtrack that you would just go around and listen to in your headphones.
I am surprised we didn't try and get Trent Reznor to do this score, because he's the king of the industrial mainstream music, and like he does movie scores now.
Well, when I say industrial, I don't really mean industrial the musical genre. I just mean it sounds like industry. You know what I mean? Like it's harsh and it's metallic and it's it's just like pieces of metal banging into each other. And there are places, and I think this is intentional. This is not a criticism. There are places where I'm not sure if what I'm hearing is supposed to be the sounds of the city or the soundtrack.
And That's great because that's also
I think
very
that's-
true about the original Blade Runner as well.
Especially the scene where he first meets the prostitute that takes him to the underground. When you get the big like, I don't know if that's like traffic or like something in the buildings next to them, or if it's just the score. And the score is telling us this is the worst, bleakest place you could possibly be in the city. Because I think that might be all it's saying. It's just every now and again it feels the need in the soundtrack to hit you in the face and say, this is a scary place you don't want to be in. And you can clock it. You can put your watch by it every minute and a half or 2 minutes. And you just go, and you're like, yes, okay, I don't want to be here. This place is scary.
And they eat like grubs.
Yeah.
The
And they have farms for that. Remember, the
food,
he's a farmer of that.
Well, and that's Wallace's big breakthrough is grubs.
Yeah.
Grown grubs.
Grown artificial protein.
That's the one
He
big
made a
thing
big
that makes
leap.
me not want to be in this future.
Well, you know what? And he made a big leap, and it makes you kind of. We're kind of lucky that they're not cannibals, honestly. That he doesn't just like make people that you eat then.
Or like Soylent Green.
Right. That too. Yeah. That could be happening. That's true. That could have happened. That's how they get steak now.
Wow.
That's what was happening in Matrix, right?
Yeah, I don't know how we got there. That was great.
Jesus Christ.
That was all you, man.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. It's a logical leap, really.
Look, I know you're on the cannibal thing. You have been for months.
I know. I wrote a book that kind of has cannibals in it because they turn into food and then they eat each other. Anyway, Rasco, what other things did you want to make sure we talked about? Unless you got more stuff on score.
I wanted to go back for a minute to something we touched on for like half a second in the very beginning of this.
I know, guys. I'm sorry. That was really dark. My mind just ran away with itself. Sorry. Go ahead, Rasco.
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit ago about Ridley Scott and like if he had made this movie, would it be the same movie? Would it be different? How would it have been handled? And I think that what's really interesting is that like Ridley Scott, he's a very different director now than he was in the beginning of his career. And Denis Villeneuve and DV, he's one of those guys where he's like heavily influenced by a lot of older directors that have since changed their style if they're still working today. Ridley Scott is one of those directors. And so I'm so glad that he didn't direct this movie because the way Ridley Scott shoots movies, it's so much more modern. Like he's changed a lot with people like James Cameron is another director who kind of has a big influence on the way that like modern big budget Hollywood movies are shot. They're just different. And so that's what I really did like about the choice to just immediately go, let's not have Ridley Scott make this movie again.
And this movie is so out of time. You know, I mean, again, partly because it's astounding that anybody could make a movie this good that doesn't end up falling into the trap of being too modern, because it is a future of a totally other world. You know, like I might get lambasted for saying this for some people, but like I wish Star Trek would look at this because you know it's a universe that was always starting from a place, and you just have to move forward and say, okay, the history up to a certain point is different now.
Well, and Ridley Scott also did this with Prometheus.
Yeah,
he extrapolated from now again for Prometheus.
Yeah.
I like that this movie. I really appreciate this movie didn't do that.
It could have been made anytime, and yet still speaks to a lot of modern issues and stuff that you know, and just it's out of time. It's about human condition that never changes.
Well, I'll put it this way: it extrapolates from the Blade Runner universe, but it is also not a retro technology piece. It is a piece that looks thoroughly modern. It doesn't look like it is purposely trying to rebuild something that we thought, you know, the future would look at and like in, you know, the 1980s, but has taken that universe and extrapolated that technology and said, this is what we can now do on film to extrapolate that technology and move.
Yeah,
that's fair. It's not
you couldn't have made until now.
It's not like when we do something where we extrapolate from like 50s, where we're like, this is what the 50s thought the future was like, and we're doing that now. We're like, it doesn't look new or modern. This still does. This still looks like something that takes place in the future, but it is the future of the previous.
There's a lot of things that if we extrapolated from now, it would do that, or we would do that. It didn't. Obviously, I mean, we're so away from flying cars. We still don't care about that anymore. And obviously, like a lot of the graphics on computers and things would be different. It's still very kind of.
I love that it doesn't have the holograms everywhere.
Yeah, me too.
I know.
Yeah.
Sorry, but Star Trek.
Look, we understand that that's what the future's probably going to look like, but I'm bored of it already. Can we go a different direction?
Right. Eric, what else did you want to talk about?
I don't know if I have anything big. I'm going to reiterate or double down on what I said in the how we felt about.
Yeah.
I don't want a sequel for this movie, but I love the idea of in 20 or 30 years, another genuine filmmaker coming back and checking in on this universe and seeing what it's like 20, 30 years down the road.
Yeah.
I love the idea of, over the course of decades, having different genuine filmmakers just kind of keep checking on this. I mean, we won't know whether that happens for that 20, 30 years, but I love that idea. I don't know. How come the Blade Runner gun's not like one of the more famous sci-fi guns? It's really distinct, and I like that this gun. Yeah. I like that Kay's gun looks like that, but like it was just like the next model. Like it still had that look and shape, but it was different. Also, Ryan Gosling, I'm pretty sure is ashamed of how beautiful he is. And I think it's in his contracts that he has to get beat up and bloodied and bruised and has to have like bandages somewhere on his body. I think that's what's going on there.
Every movie he's in?
In every movie he's in. It's not always his face. Like a nice guy's not his face, he's got cast. But I think that's a thing. I think he's really ashamed of how handsome he is. And that's fair. I don't really have anything else. We talked about a lot. I'm really happy with how much we talked about.
We did. I mean, I love the fact, I would love the idea of, in 20, 30 years, them revisiting the universe and this being a thing. I don't want an immediate sequel. I think Blade Runner is one of those things that is a once every 50 years kind of movie.
Well, and the thing is, this suggests that there's going to be a rebellion, and if you make that movie, that's not a Blade Runner movie. But the movie about the world after the rebellion could be.
But Alexi, to something you said earlier, I think you could do in between novels and make them about the big mythology stuff. I think that'd be okay.
I actually don't want it.
Okay. All right.
I actually think that cyberpunk or noir futurism or whatever you want to call it works best in the small snippets. It's supposed to be personal. It's not supposed to be the big earth-shattering things. In fact, I would say the difference between your action movie and your cybernetic action movie or your futurist action movie and cyberpunk is ultimately this. Matrix is your big action movie. We're going to shake down the world. We're going to take on the system and so on. Cyberpunk is, the system is too big to be taken down.
Well, no, I get that. I'm just saying that if you did it, that's why you would do it in a different medium. Is all I'm saying. Like you wouldn't do it in a film. You do it in prose or something. But
I think that ruins the mood.
I also tend to agree with you, but
not to get too niche and like super geeky, but there is in the early '90s a birth of post-cyberpunk, which is cyberpunk stories that are bigger, and that's kind of what Snow Crash is called a lot of times.
Okay.
It is cyberpunk, but it is also about.
All I'm saying is this world is so interesting that I hesitate to say I don't want more detail. You know what I mean? And like, there's a lot of information that you can't be given in a smaller character-driven story that I'd love to somehow have. Is all I'm saying, because it's such an interesting world.
I do think you could write an interesting novel about Wallace.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, I think that we're in a very special time looking at the resurgence of cyberpunk. I mean, on all mediums at this point. I mean, from books as such, you know, it helps if I put it like that. From books as such to things like Westworld, Mr. Robot, now Blade Runner. Cyberpunk 2077 has a video game. Is a video game that's coming out.
It's been coming out for 5 years. When will it be here?
Well, I think what is it? CD Projekt Red says it'll be here when it's ready, and that's pretty much what they're doing.
But stop giving me trailers that I want to play.
I agree. But
we
you know,
didn't. We didn't talk about this, but real quick, I want to talk about how interesting it is that they push this so much as like they put so much money into this.
I lost you. Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Alexi, can you hear us?
I can hear you now.
Okay, go ahead.
I think it's really interesting that they made like a movie with no studio interference, like an art movie, and they released it like an art movie where there's no prequel novels or comics, there's no toys, there's none of that stuff. But they put so much money into it. I'm actually now thinking about it, really surprised we didn't get any.
Well,
There's no video game.
I was thinking earlier, like, I would be horrified to have a Wallace action figure. Like, if I had that sitting on my shelf somewhere, I would be, like, I'd turn them around. You know,
see,
like, I wouldn't be able to, if they got the eyes right, I would just be like,
you know,
I couldn't do it.
if I was
What I want is the action figure of the two women overlaid on top of each other. Like,
That tells us a lot about you.
yeah. No,
wow.
I just don't think it's possible. It's a joke. It's funny. But the big thing I was gonna mention for my last thing, I guess I'll just say really quick, is I think that's technically one of the most impressive scenes I've seen in a really long time, and I'm not quite sure how some of that was accomplished. I had the same thing with that I did with that scene in Alien Covenant of all things, with the guy that's in. Twice in the same scene, and he keeps walking around himself just so that they can keep punching me in the face with how impressive that scene is. And I was like, stop it! I don't know how you're accomplishing this. Stop it! Yeah, the overlay scene did the same thing. Anyway, that's my last bit. But
no, it was
go ahead.
amazing scene. Amazing scene.
Okay, any other last minute things about this movie that we need to get to?
Roger Deakins should get nominated for an Oscar.
Yes, he should.
This movie should get nominated for an Oscar for a lot of things.
And it probably won't, but
it might get a Best Picture
You
nod.
might be surprised. You might be surprised. Actually, that might be where they try and recoup. This movie. I mean, the marketing on this movie and the budget on this movie. I think that they would be foolish not to try and.
But would they spend more money for the like for your consideration kind of a thing?
They might. That's far be it from me to presume the logic of any Hollywood studio. But I'll put it this way: they put together a very solid team for this movie, and money really, in many ways, was no object. Amazingly so. I mean, the marketing team on this, some of those people I know personally, these guys know their jobs, and they know it very well, and they're very good at it. And I think them selling this as a atmospheric piece was the only way to sell this film. But I think that we're looking at Hollywood not thinking about what they were making. They just went, oh, we have to have another Blade Runner movie because it's this thing.
Yeah, I don't want to keep arguing with you on that. You're right. I just think it might have been smart to put something about what's actually happening in the film.
Yeah, because if you don't know anything about Blade Runner, I don't think from the trailers you even know it's about robots.
And I also think some people might have looked at it, and I mean, like, obviously this isn't fair, but I think some people might have looked at it and been like, well, why did you make two Ghost in the Shell movies in the same year?
Yeah, if only Ghost in the Shell had this care and dedication.
If only Ghost in the Shell, I mean, you know.
Imagine if we had Ghost in the Shell really good and this movie this year.
It would have been nuts, yeah. I just wish that movie had come out next year because it would have made even less money.
Oh no, it's another Blade Runner.
And Ghost in the Shell is one of those things where I looked at it and I was like, this could have been amazing. The anime is amazing. It's one of my favorite pieces of anime of all time. And what were they thinking here? And then for this to come out and then Blade Runner to come out, you see the dichotomy. And it's so sad because, I mean, Blade Runner certainly informed Ghost in the Shell.
It really
I
is
would
like
say
being
that-
two sides of the same movie. Like you got to see the corporate studio interfered version of this movie, and you got to see the artistic version of this movie.
That's actually a great point, and I didn't consider it like that, but you're
And
absolutely
again, it separates
correct.
audiences because I met those people that love Ghost in the Shell because they thought it was just a fun popcorn flick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I don't agree with that, but I really despised that movie. But I just and again, I'm not trying to be prudish about it and be like I'm better than you because I like this movie that's for people who read. I kind of stand by that point. I'm just saying that I do think that it's interesting that one of these resonated with people more than the other one did, and also Ghost in the Shell kind of did bomb. Even not just for its budget. It didn't do well.
No, it bombed bad. But I'll say this, that the Ghost in the Shell was actually the media interfered or the studio interfered version of this movie. And that's such a shame because I think it would have been a treat to have both of them, especially since the anime was so well done and, informed, you could do Ghost in the Shell and the anime at least, and Blade Runner back to back, and it almost be a seamless immersion into one world.
It's also somewhat unfair to compare them because one is a remake of an animated film and one is a sequel and is still in the same kind of medium entirely. But it is really weird that they both came out the same year and that movie was very much what I might have been worried this one would be.
Yeah.
So weird.
I mean, there are people who had genuine trepidation going into this movie, going, what are we going to in fact see? In fact, I've actually seen people who've said, a couple of people have made the comment that there was not a lot of action in this movie. Absolutely correct. There are people who are surprised that there was as much action in it as there was. Like, oh my God, we have a car chase.
There is a moment in the movie where I had to rewrite my brain when they shoot a missile into a building. I'm like, that feels really big for this story, and I was like, but we have missiles now. Like, it's not that big, but for some reason my brain that feels really big for the story to blow something up
and
like
the
that.
Stakes are pretty high.
But it is this weird thing where it's like, well, things don't only blow up in movies. Like, there are missiles. Things do get blown up.
Things get blown up.
It's not grounded.
Yeah, and there is an escalation to the action. We punch through the wall, and then we go up from there.
I have a question. Have you guys ever seen in any other kind of movie someone use a kite to EMP some sort of flying vehicle?
No, but it's awesome.
That was awesome. Yeah,
yeah, it's kind of Skyhook with an EMP and no person.
Yeah,
it's not like Skyhook at all.
What the heck just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we should probably go ahead and get going. We've been at this almost 2 hours. Of course,
we said we weren't going to.
Well, we had so much.
I know.
I don't know.
It's so much to say. We could go more.
We could. It's just. I don't want to keep my co-host here all night. I always do this. I'm always like, we're gonna shoot for an hour. I'm gonna cut it off in an hour and a half. But we had we had a lot of people that had a lot to say, and then Rasco was just having such a good time, just hanging out. That I just didn't want to cut it off on him. Rasco, please come back more often. We have missed you so much.
Definitely.
Can you take your glasses off to prove that you don't have weird robot eyes?
Say something so we can see your face.
Hello.
Okay, just checking.
Okay, but he is
my own little void contest right there.
We are still going to have to reset him back to baseline, though. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I can see the barcode look, right?
Yeah.
Interlinked.
Anyway, well, thanks again. Thanks again, folks, for watching. We sure appreciate it. We're going to get going, but we will see you again with more content here this week on Geekvolution. I don't know what the next movie for a spoiler cast is going to be. I don't know if we'll have anything before Ragnarok.
Are we not spoiler casting the Snowman?
I don't think we're going to spoiler cast the Snowman, but we are going to do how we felt about the Snowman because we have felt like going to potentially crap.
Apparently that movie's getting good reviews.
Is it really? Well, anyway, we're having fun watching those kinds.
How about
of movies.
Geostorm?
So we're not going to Geostorm.
You have to take Jason.
Jason really wants to see that.
Jason loves disaster
because
movies.
he likes disaster movies. But here's the problem: I would probably have to preview it to make sure it was appropriate enough for him to see it. I don't want to watch that twice.
It's like an Irwin Allen special. I mean, he likes Irwin Allen specials, really?
Yeah, apparently. But he also likes, you know, slow and cerebral movies. I think he would probably like Blade Runner a lot, but obviously he's too young to watch it. Anyway, thanks again for watching, folks. We're going to go and get going, but we will see you again soon. I am Captain Logan. This was Eric.
Interlinked.
This was Alexi.
Power of
And
the people.
Jackson Rasco.
Peace out.
Once again, I was Captain Logan saying good night. Good night.
Good night.